Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Cuh, and I am joined by my co host, Patrick Fitzgerald. In this episode, we will go over the latest news and notes around baseball, recap the hitter and pitcher performances from this past week, and of course, some streamer recommendations at the end of the show. Pitcher List writer Nate Schwartz will also be joining the show to talk about his recent article on Mason Wynn. But before we get into all that, Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, John. Orioles didn't play today, which means they couldn't lose and also have a bad starting pitcher outing. So, good off day. Hopefully they kick it into high gear by the end of April. How are you doing?
Uh, yeah, unfortunately, the Twins did play today, and they ended up losing to the Royals in, I believe it was a 3-2 game. Yeah, it ended up losing the series 1-3 to the Royals. So everything's going great in our respective baseball fandoms.
Yeah,
it's
Ober
it's
looks good at least though, and Ryan
That's
was
true. Yeah.
pissed
He
about the
was he had some nice pitches. I'm surprised they pulled him at like around 80-ish pitches. I was hoping they'd let him go a little bit longer, but they are being really cautious with Ober and Ryan in terms of pitch count right now.
Yeah,
But
understandably so.
it is really interesting with Ober, it, and maybe I just haven't noticed this with a bunch of other pitchers too. I'm sure maybe you noticed this with the Orioles, but his pitching motion looks like a guy who's like throwing BP. Like he looks so casual while throwing, and then he's like, "Oh, that's like a 92-mile-an-hour fastball that's going across the plate," and he looks like the guy who's throwing pitches at the home run derby in terms of his mechanics. So, yeah, it is really interesting just to watch baseball and remind yourself that like all these guys like throw completely differently from each other, and how one guy, so there's some guys who like looks like absolute power pitchers who look incredibly tired that they're using their entire body, and then there's just guys that look like Ober who are super relaxed and chucking pitches across the plate.
Yeah, that's one fun thing about baseball. Lots of different swings, lots of different size guys, and they're all, incredible players. So it's pretty cool to watch.
Right, yeah, like Aaron Judge and Jose Altuve play the same sport, and they're over a
Yeah,
foot
exactly.
difference. uh and the Jose Altuve also now joining the outfield. I don't know if you've watched any clips of him. He does not look that comfortable fielding fly balls in the outfield. But he surprisingly has not made too many mistakes. So, um, yeah, shout out to him at least for learning a new position in his mid 30s. So,
Seriously, yeah.
yeah. Well, anyways, before we get into the rest of the podcast, just a reminder that you can follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. You can send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform that you listen to. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're also on YouTube. So wherever you listen to your podcast or watch your podcast, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy listening to the show. All right, we are going to get into the injury list notes. It's not as crazy as last week's, but it is still, unfortunately, pretty long. And we're going to start off with a really big name in Ketel Marte of the Diamondbacks, who unfortunately had a hamstring strain. And manager Torey Lovello says that he is going to miss um, a series of weeks. And probably the most frustrating thing about this, for me at least, was that they didn't call up Jordan Lawler to replace him. Like I think they called up Pedro Pajes, I think is who they called up. I'm not
Tim
100.
Tim Tawa. Tim
Oh no,
Tawa.
that's right. Yes, yeah, I'm getting him mixed up with another player. But yeah, Jordan Lawler is just still just down in AAA, wondering what does he have to do to get the call up. But yeah, what do you think about the Ketel Marte injury, and yeah, kind of just the significance of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge bummer. Obviously, I have him on a couple teams, so it stinks to see him go down. He was coming off a career year, just signed a contract extension. So really unfortunate. It is going to hurt the Diamondbacks offense a little bit, but I think that, they're still going to be pretty potent. Tao is a little interesting, maybe in your deeper leagues. He has a decent minor league track record, but playing in some pretty offensively friendly environments. But yeah, one thing with Marte is he's had hamstring issues before. So I think they're going to be pretty patient, like the manager said. So, I wouldn't be expecting to have him in your lineup, for the rest of the month at least. So it is a blow for sure because we used a high pick on him.
Yeah, for sure. If if Mookie didn't have second base eligibility in your leagues, then Marte was probably the first second baseman taken in most drafts. So, yeah, tough to see one of those big names go down pretty much immediately. Another big name, Pablo Lopez of the Twins, is going on the 15 DIL with a hamstring strain, with David Festa as the likely call up. They haven't made it yet because the Pablo's start was going to be this coming Sunday, so there's still a few days there. So I think most likely it's going to be David Festa because his schedule lines up with Pablo Lopez. Obviously, a lot of people were hoping for Zebby Matthews to get the call up there because he's been absolutely insane in AAA, but it's looking more like Festa will be the person who gets called up there. But yeah, Pablo going down is kind of a big deal. I think based on what I've heard, it actually wasn't that bad of a strain, but just kind of for cautionary sake and to basically get the call up from the minor leagues, they put Pablo on the 15 DL so that they would have the open roster spot. But yeah, Patrick, any thoughts about this injury?
Yeah, I mean, it stings to see Paulo go down, but it does open up opportunities for some pretty exciting arms. Festa's going to have pitched by the time you guys are listening to this. He's supposed to pitch Friday against Detroit. So, Detroit's not an easy matchup these days, but, not the worst place to make your season debut. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Festa does. And it sounds like they might actually put Zebby in a six-man rotation at some point, which would be great to see. I think that he's the better pitcher of the two, but Festa's a little bit older, and for scheduling reasons, they're gonna throw him on Friday. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to see him in action. He struggled a little bit last year, but definitely flashing potential.
Yeah, Festa probably had the better major league season compared to Zebby last year, but that's also because when Zebby made his first start, or was it his second start? He basically just got knocked around, and people were teeing off him the entire start. So he basically had a really rude awakening to the major leagues, and then the Twins were like, maybe not. But yeah, Festa had a little bit more experience, and so that's probably one of the reasons why he's getting the call up.
Yeah.
Some more injury notes. Nestor Cortez, the Brewers, has a flexor strain in his left elbow. Got put on the 15 DIL. Did receive a PRP injection, so it will be at least a couple weeks before he comes back. Andrew Benintendi of the White Sox went on the 10 DIL with an adductor sprain. Spencer Arrighetti of the Astros went on the IL for a broken thumb. It wasn't even an in-game injury. He got hit by a line drive while they were practicing or kind of warming up before a game. He will not need surgery for that, which is good, but it is still unlikely that he returns until maybe the midsummer. Arrighetti was kind of one of those big names that was getting a little bit of helium in drafts. Patrick, what do you think about this in terms of kind of impact to fantasy teams?
Yeah, I wasn't in on Eric Getty this year, but it is really unfortunate, especially the way it happened. I mean, I think he got hit by a batting practice ball from the opposing team. I mean, that's just, those are the kind of things that you feel like happen in high school and college, not the big leagues, but apparently it happens sometimes in the majors too. I'm not sure who the Astros are going to turn to fill the spot, but it is, just really unfortunate for Eric Getty, who definitely has, breakout potential. The other two, nothing really too big for me. I know the Brewers have Quinn Priester in the rotation now after that
Yeah,
trade with the Red Sox, and they should be getting some other guys back soon. So they do have some reinforcements, but pretty beat up Brewers rotation right now.
yeah. Ryan Bliss of the Mariners is going on the 10 DIL with a right biceps tear, which is kind of unfortunate. He was actually looking okay coming out the gate for this season. Wyatt Langford of the Texas Rangers going on the 10 DIL with an oblique strain. I wasn't able to find anything about how severe they think that strain is, but they do think they are still anticipating him to come back soon-ish. Zach Eflin of the Orioles on the 15 DIL with a right lat strain. He's going to be out for a minimum of 2 weeks, but probably a little bit more. Never want to rush a guy back from a lat strain, especially as a pitcher. Jake Rogers of the Tigers went on the 10-day IL with an oblique strain, which really just means there's more opportunities for Dylan Dingler, who's been really good at the plate in spurts this season. So if you are looking for a catcher with more playing time, Dingler might be available in some of your leagues. Jackson Merrill of the Padres, really unfortunate here, 10-day IL with a hamstring strain. He was absolutely doing wondrous stuff at the plate to start the season for the Padres, who were super hot. Yeah, what do you think about Merrill going on the IL here?
Yeah, another guy who just signed an extension and went down. Super unfortunate. It's gonna take, the Padres lineup is strong but pretty top heavy, so they're gonna lose a guy at the top there. That's gonna hurt for sure. Their replacement I think is gonna be Brandon Lockridge, who's like a minor league speed journeyman. So it's gonna hurt the Padres for sure. Hopefully it's not, too serious and he'll be back in there in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Um, we're going to mention this, but I mean, Jurickson Profar, who was on the Padres last season, was signed by Atlanta, ended up getting an 80-day or 80 game suspension because of PEDs. But Merrill is an outfielder for that team, so they're kind of they lost a little bit of outfielder depth with
Mhm.
Profar leaving, and then also now with Merrill getting an injury. That's when you bring up a minor leaguer who like doesn't have great stats. That's kind of the situation you're in.
Yeah, they're
Connor,
playing Jose Iglesias in left field yesterday.
oh, that's tough. Oof, don't love that. All right, Connor Wong of the Red Sox on the 10-day IL with a fractured finger. Ivan Herrera, 10-day IL with a bone bruise. He will miss about a month. This is where I got it correct. Pedro Pais will be the everyday catcher for the Cards. They are not planning to move Wilson Contreras to the catcher position. It is unfortunate for Herrera because he had like was it like a 3-day homer or 3 homer day? I
Yeah.
think like literally maybe 1 or 2 days before getting this bone bruise. So was getting a little bit of helium as a catcher. He was kind of on the outside looking in 15 teamers for in a single catcher league. Probably was rostered in 2 catcher leagues for sure. But yeah, he had showed a little promise with the bat, but unfortunately is going to be out for a month with that bone bruise.
Yeah.
Uh,
Terrible to see. Just
yeah,
horrible
don't
timing for
love
that
it.
guy.
Yeah. Blake Snell of the Dodgers going on the 15 DIL with left shoulder inflammation. He will resume throwing next week. He did not require an injection to deal with any of that inflammation, as an MRI didn't reveal any structural damage. But this is kind of just Blake Snell beginning of the season, normal injury stuff. Like, again, he doesn't start cooking until it's like July. So
Mhm.
this is the Blake Snell we're pretty familiar with. It is unfortunate that he has an injury, but it doesn't sound like it's super serious, at least in terms of uh, an injury that will keep him out for multiple months.
Yeah,
And
just gotta
then,
hold the line.
yeah, exactly. Finally, Colin Holderman of the Pirates went on the 15 DIL with a sprained right knee, which really means that Dennis Santana is the firm closer in Pittsburgh now. There is more or less no opposition to him, so hopefully you were able to pick him up in any of your leagues right now because he is, as few wins as the Pirates get, Santana will be the one closing those out. In terms of returns, not a lot there. Freddie Freeman is hoping to return. We're recording this on Thursday. He is hoping to return on Friday after slipping in the shower and spraining his ankle. But yeah, he will give a much needed boost to the floundering Dodgers team, which is 10-4. So yeah, yeah, he'll be back. But he was doing really well before he got put on the injured list. So I'm sure they'll appreciate having his bat back in the lineup. In terms of some injury updates, Tony Gonsolin of the Dodgers threw 46 pitches in his most recent rehab start, so probably still be a couple more rehab starts before he joins the big league team or before the Dodgers figure out what to do with all their pitchers. Francisco Alvarez of the Mets played 5 innings in his first rehab start, which is key there. He is coming back from, I believe it's a broken hand. Um,
Yep.
so well, hopefully he is able to make it back. Lucas Giolito of the Red Sox, 64 pitches in his most rehab start. It's looking like he'll join the team next week. Maybe that spells the end, unfortunately, for Richard Fitz, or maybe some other. I can't remember who's the
Yeah,
number 5
I
starter.
think I think it's gonna be Sean Newcomb first, but then
Yeah,
Fitz might
sure,
be in
yes,
trouble when Brian Bayo and Cutter Crawford come back, so it's gonna get pretty cloudy soon.
right, yeah. Although no real updates on those two, I should mention with Bayo, and with Crawford at this moment. Clark Schmidt did have his second rehab start on Thursday, so he is kind of wrapping up to be coming back soon ish. Tobias Myers, one of those Brewers pitchers who's currently on the IL, 45 pitches in his first rehab start, so probably be a couple more starts before he is ready to come back. Zach Neto of the Angels continue to play in rehab games. He has played multiple games at shortstop so far, which is good. But I think he's still on the timeline of coming back probably in late April or early May, which is what we expected when he was first injured in spring training. Ronaldo Lopez of Atlanta had arthroscopic surgery on his right shoulder, which and doctor said that he's going to be reevaluated in July at the earliest. So he's basically not coming back until late August or September, and there might be a chance that he just doesn't pitch at all this season, which is kind of unfortunate. And then Victor Robles of the Mariners, he dislocated his shoulder, and then after they looked a little bit closer, it turns out he actually fractured it as well. So he's actually going to be out for a minimum of 3 months now, which is super unfortunate for a guy who looked like he had turned a corner last season in Seattle. Had like a really good September, I believe. Was getting a little bit of helium and drops, not crazy, but a guy that maybe you would pick up at the end as a spec ad who could potentially have some good contributions to your team in terms of average and speed. But now it looks like he is going to be out for the at least for the first half of the season. And then the only other transaction to mention besides the Jurickson Profar suspension is that the Brewers did trade for Quinn Priester for the Red Sox, for like basically it was like a top 10 prospect that they had, a first round pick in next year's draft, and then I think it was another player to be named or something like that. So Quinn Priester is now the SB5 in Milwaukee, but we'll see how long that lasts with hopefully Tobias Myers and with Brandon Woodruff coming back soon-ish. So that's all the injury news. Any sort of takeaways from that, Patrick, that you want to add?
Yeah, I'm excited for Neto to come back. I was hoping that it would be sooner, but it does seem like they're being pretty conservative just because this is basically his spring training. Ronaldo Lopez, disappointing, obviously, but he's pretty much a fantasy afterthought at this point for the rest of the season, unless it's like a dynasty keeper format. And then one last one I'd tack on is Spencer Strider had his likely last rehab start today. So he's going to slot back in for Atlanta next week, which is going to be huge with the loss of Lopez. He's probably going to take that Bryce Elder spot or whoever they've been running out in the five. I know Elder got one spot start, but Strider, his velo's down a little bit from what it's been years past, but he's been just racking up strikeouts in the minor leagues, as you would hope, but at a pretty absurd rate. I think he had like a 45% CSW today in his outing against the Orioles AAA team, which is a pretty good team. So it's definitely going to be exciting to see him on the major league mound again.
Yeah. He only basically missed like 3 starts. So the fact that he was going as late as he was in drafts, I think like maybe around round 10 or round 11 in 12 and 15 teamers. Yeah, not a bad investment if you were able to pick him up.
No, we'll see what the year holds, but he does, he is kind of one of those guys where if he's on the mound, you expect him to really perform.
Yeah. All right, that is it for injury news. We are going to move on to player performances. So, Patrick, start us off with who did well on Friday.
Yeah, so going back to last Friday, April 4th, one of the biggest performers, and he's been one of the biggest performers for the whole young season so far, is Willie Abreu, outfielder with the Red Sox. On that day, he went 3 for 5 with a home run, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. And despite coming into the season questionable to even see opening day because of a severe stomach bug that caused him to lose a lot of weight, Willie Abreu, he made the roster and he's been Boston's hottest player. Pretty much the whole first couple weeks of the season. Going into that day, he had a 326 WRC plus, and him and Christian Campbell have been a great duo in the middle of the order. And Devers is hitting now, so the Red Sox offense is really kind of firing on all cylinders. Justin Wainwright, in his Walk This Wade hitter recap article for this day, talked about how people are hoping to see Roman Anthony, the Abreu potential breakout here, might push the schedule back there. But I'm wondering what you think, John. I mean, they do have Abreu, at least on the big side of platoon and right, Jaron Duran every day and left. Devers is kind of locked into DH now. And then center field is Ceddanne Rafaela, who feels a little bit replaceable to me. He'll still be on the team, but maybe more in like a Swiss Army knife utility type role. So what do you think do you think that Abreu's breakout is going to impact Roman Anthony at all, or do you think he's on his own schedule?
I think he's probably on his own schedule, just in the
Yeah.
sense that I kind of agree with you. It's probably a bit more dependent on Rafaela.
Mm.
And not that Rafaela has been bad necessarily, but I think they probably were like, oh, it could be Rafaela, it could be Abreu. And I think with Abreu now doing better, they're probably looking more at, okay, do we replace Rafaela now? Probably the only thing that is unfortunate is that Roman Anthony has not been, I guess, like super consistent. I think in the minors, like he's had some really
Mm.
good games, and then he's had a couple duds here and there. So um, they're probably not chomping at the bit to bring him up right now, but he might force his way up to the majors depending on how the next month goes in AAA. So I don't think it necessarily. I don't think Wilyer Abreu doing well pushes back Roman Anthony's schedule. I think, yeah, like you, I think it's probably a bit more dependent on Rafaela now, in terms of if they want to replace him.
Yeah, yeah. I think Anthony he's hitting under 200 in AAA, but he still has like 800 OPS. So one of those weird early season stat lines. But yeah, I could see Rafaela, playing center field, shortstop, second base, reserve role, and then I would imagine they would push Duran over to center and put Anthony in left. Abreu is also a great defensive outfielder, so that could be a really fun outfield both with the bat and in the field. So yeah, pretty exciting for Red Sox fans. On the pitching side for Friday, April 4th, I'm going with the title man here. Nick on his SP roundup was it was lose change. Shout out to Jesus Luzardo. He carved up the Dodgers. 7 innings, no runs, 2 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts, 12 whiffs, and a 29% CSW, and he got the win. And right before we recorded today, Luzardo threw 6 innings of 1 run ball against Atlanta. So he's just continuing his fantastic start to the season. In this outing on the 4th, he dominated the Dodgers. Through his first 12 innings of the season, he had a career high 5.14 PLV, which is our pitch level metric here at Pitcher List. And it's mainly because of a new sweeper that he's added that's posted a 5.46 PLV so far. This sweeper, combined with his normal slider, it gives him two different types of sliders, and he attacks lefties with the sweeper, and then he saves the regular slider a little bit more for righties. And he's throwing that regular slider harder than ever, so it's become a little bit more of a potent weapon against opposite-handed hitters. So I'm interested to see what the rest of the year looks like for Luzardo, because the sweeper is a great weapon, but he's never had a tough time getting lefties out. He has pretty big platoon splits. I think his career ERA estimators are like a full run or so higher for right-handed hitter than lefties. But he's also improved his changeup a little bit. It's having a little bit more fade on it and a little bit more drop. So it's becoming a little bit just a better offering. So it's going to be interesting to see. Luzardo's flashed ace upside in the past. So I guess the question is, we've seen this from him before. Do we think that this is just another classic Luzardo run, or do we think that he's really taken a step forward and with his new team?
I do find it interesting that he is finding the success like away from the Miami, pitching
Mhm.
factory. Um, Now, granted, he was in Oakland before that, and then he got traded to Miami. So it wasn't like he started in the Miami factory. But I want to believe so bad that this is
Mhm.
real. Like I want Luzardo to do so well, and because he's been so average, I think for the last probably 4 or 5 years is maybe accurate to say about how we felt about Luzardo's pitching career. And yeah, I love that he's finding success in Philly. I do kind of feel like he is a must pick up at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just like he's had two great starts. He's on his way to a third in facing Atlanta. And because he plays for the Phillies, he's almost always going to have a win chance when he's on the mound, as opposed to when he was with Miami. So, yeah, I do feel like there's no reason to not at least check if Luzardo's available on your wire still. I don't know what his roster ships are looking at right now, but they've got to be climbing, especially after this start against Atlanta.
Yeah, it should be approaching 100% at this point. I mean, he's got great upside. Thinking about him as potentially the SB4 in Philadelphia, I mean, that's could be the best rotation in baseball.
Yeah, it's when Zach Wheeler's your number one, like yeah, you feel pretty good about the rest of your rotation.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to Saturday's games. Thanks to Kevin O'Brien for the Man on a Grisham hitter recap article. But we are going to talk about Shea Langoliers of the Athletics. Went 1 for 2 with a homer, 2 runs, 2 RBIs, and 3 walks. The knock on Langoliers has been that he's a low average, high strikeout power guy. Of course, if you listen to this podcast, you know I love Langoliers. But of course, the big dig with him is just the guy can't make contact at the plate, and he's not good in OBP leagues either. But this year, he's been showing better plate discipline. Yes, it's only a 10 game sample size that I was looking at here, but he has a 14.3% strikeout rate and a 14.3% walk rate, which is crazy. Um, it's probably helped by the fact that he did have 3 walks in this game. But yeah, his average is still not great. It's 222. But the biggest change is his OBP, which is 333. And because of how high powered this A's offense is, it's kind of looking like he might be able to get to 60 runs and 90 RBI this season. He's, of course, is somewhat limited in playing time because he plays catcher. And the DH spot is usually already taken by Brent Rooker in with the Athletics. So he doesn't have as many plate appearances as maybe other power guys would be expected to have. But yet, I still love Langoliers as a guy that you should be picking. Not that you should be; he should already be picked up in most of your leagues.
Mhm.
But if you're in an average league, right, a regular standard 5x5, it probably hurts a little bit more because of just how low his average is. But if you are playing in an OBP league or an OPS league, I think Langoliers is just far and away, probably I hesitate to say he's a top 3 catcher because there's still some really good hitting catchers there, but he is making a case to be in that conversation.
Yeah, and he's even now, 5 days after this good game, he's still walking more than he's striking out, which is pretty shocking given his career track record to this point. And I think the A's, I think their offense is slightly above average, but their park looks to be very run friendly. So I think that when you combine those two factors, he's going to be a great play at home, and then you're still running him out there when he's on the road. So he's a really solid, feels like high floor catching option.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for context, last season, or really the 2 seasons prior to this, where he had over 130 games played, he had a 29% strikeout rate in 2023, 27% strikeout rate in 2024, 7% walk rate in 2023, 7.7% walk rate in 2024. And yeah, looking at the stats right now, he currently has a 13% strikeout rate and a 15.2% walk rate, which is crazy. Now, some of these home run to fly ball ratios that we're seeing for some of these players are kind of nuts. He has a 27% home run to fly ball ratio, so that's clearly not sustainable. But he's also doing this with a 205 average, so that walk rate is real. And it is helping his OBP a lot. And it's making him more than just a guy who hits homers and is able to get a few more counting stats as well. So yeah, I'd love to see the growth from Langoliers in his game this season.
Absolutely.
Moving on to pitchers, thanks to Nick for the Tomoyuki Performance Indicators SP Roundup article, and we are going to talk about Chris Bassett. Um, 6.2 innings, no one runs, 4 hits, no walks, and 9 strikeouts against the Mets, which is insane. That's not a stat line I would ever expect to say from Chris Bassett, but he feels like he has one of these like every single year. And I love Chris Bassett if he's fantasy relevant. He's always on the cusp of like a guy who is completely droppable and just on your waiver wire, or a guy that you like want to keep on your roster as like an SP4. He had much better command in this performance. Obviously, no walks. He had 2 walks in his previous performance, so a little bit of a blemish there. But when you have a literal kitchen sink of pitches, I think he had like 8 or 9 different pitches in that were uh, marked by Statcast. You really just need a few of them to be good enough to have a successful night. He does get Atlanta next. I think that's another start for him to be great, just because of how poor that Atlanta offense is. That Atlanta offense has been so far. But yeah, what do you think Bassett is real? Do you think that he could kind of stick on a roster as like an SP4, SP5 on fantasy teams, or do you think his ultimate destination is still going to be the waiver wire when, let's just say, like May comes around?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point he needs to be owned outside of like maybe 8 team or like maybe shallow 10 team leagues. But he just pitched again today and went 5 2/3 in Fenway Park with 1 earned run and 5 strikeouts against the Sox. So I think he has to be added and just ride it while it's good. He has a long track record of success. So it's not like he's just been a mediocre pitcher for his entire career. But at the same time, I'll say I absolutely did not see this coming and was really shocked to see him string all these starts together. So yeah, I think it's just the type of thing where you're gonna ride it while it's hot, make sure that he's has good strikeout to walk ratios in these starts, and as long as he does, just keep holding on to him, maybe sit him in the toughest matchups, but for the most part just keep running him out there. And this is found money basically in most of your leagues. And not Bassett was getting drafted in like maybe 15 teamers maybe,
Mhm.
but yeah, just enjoy the run while it lasts. And but at the same time, if he starts to regress, you know what he was last year and kind of what he could be. So don't hold on to him too long just because you got a few good starts early on.
Yeah, his season long stats are, aren't great the past few years. So he
Right.
does have like really like I truly like at past couple seasons it seems like he just has like a string of brilliance that happens, and then he goes back to like the Bassett that we all kind of know. But yeah, it's just a great start from him. Love to see Bassett doing well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't. There's some guys who have a couple good starts, and it seems like just smoke and mirrors. But when you're posting this many strikeouts and you're not walking guys, that makes me believe a little bit more for sure. So going to Sunday, April 6th, the Stay Casty Philadelphia was our headline there on the hitter recap by Johnny Gordon. But I'm not going to talk about Nick Castellanos. I'm going to talk about Rafael Devers. He has completely caught fire after just a horrible start to the season. I wrote about him in my Patience or Panic Week 1 article and expressed some concern about the strikeouts, but recommended that people stay patient, trust the track record. The first week of the season was kind of just like spring training for Devers because of the late start that he got. And he's been just incredible since. On Sunday, they had that doubleheader where they absolutely demolished the Cardinals, and he went 5 for 8 with two doubles, a home run, 5 runs, 5 RBI, and 2 walks across the 2 games, including 4 for 4 in Game 2. So he was just incredible on Sunday and really has been incredible the last week. I think after going 0 for whatever with 18 strikeouts to start the year, he's already above league average as a hitter. So yeah, just a super quick turnaround from Devers. When I recommended to stay patient, I didn't think it was going to be this quick, but it's good to see him get back into form so quickly.
Yeah, after today's game, he's got an 801 OPS on the season, so he's right back to being just a good hitter. Um, so yeah, if you somehow manage to get Devers in a trade because some manager was rage quitting early, congratulations. This seems to happen to Devers like every single year where he starts out slow anyway. So this was maybe a little bit more severe of a slow start, but it's yeah nice to see him get back on the horse in that doubleheader.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, on the pitching on Sunday, I'm going to talk about someone who's actually had a pretty slow start to the season. So Nick's SP roundup that day was Heaney, Meany, Miny, Mo for the absolute gem that Andrew Heaney threw against the Yankees. But I'm not going to talk about Andrew Heaney. I feel like we kind of know who he is at this point. So I'm going to talk about Corbin Burns. Who this was his second start of the year because he got bumped to the back of Arizona's rotation to start the season. And in this game, he went 5 innings with 4 runs, 7 hits, 4 walks, 3 strikeouts, 8 whiffs, and a 28% CSW. So kind of average CSW and whiff numbers, but a poor line. And this is his second straight poor outing to start the season. So I'm wondering if something really is wrong. I think that his stuff has definitely taken a step back. His velo's down. His PLV so far this season is 4.73, with 5 being about the average. So it is pretty low. I will say he's the type of guy who, even when he's been performing really well, his PLV is not tops in the league. So that metric is just not super favorable on him. But seeing him post through 2 starts, having that 4.73 PLV, which is close to his career low, is pretty concerning. His sinker and cutter are down about 1.5 miles per hour. And Nick actually dropped him down to 17th on the list. I think he was going as maybe SP6 or SP8, something like that. So pretty big drop here. So John, do you think that the concern about Burns is merited, or do you think it's a little overblown at this point?
Well, I mean, the weird thing with Burns is that he's never been that like power pitcher strikeout guy. At least the last 2 seasons, right? He was
Mhm.
in that. He did touch, the 30% strikeout rate for 3 seasons in Milwaukee during those Cy Young years. But his walk rate's the weird thing that's been plaguing him this season, right? It's 15%, but really, if you just look at these two starts, he had 4 walks in this start that you mentioned against the Nationals, and then 3 walks in his first start against the Yankees. So there's something going on with command here. Like, yes, obviously the velocity coming down is not good, but for a guy who you expect to be, pretty surgical in his approach, when he's pitching, he's consistently had walk rates below 10%, the last 4 seasons, and then this year, just with being really high walk numbers, is kind of nuts. And I feel like that has to be part of the reason why he's not doing so well, right? Just getting extra batters on means you're prolonging the inning, and there's more chances for runs. And so yeah, there's probably something. I wonder if there's something up with his command, right? If there's just something there where he's missing more than he should be. Like his zone, the zone rate, for example, in his cutter has dropped from 55% where it was last year to 44% this year. Now, granted, maybe the cutter isn't necessarily supposed to be a pitch that's always in the zone,
Mhm.
but the fact that he's not throwing it for as maybe as many strikes as he was last year is a little bit concerning. Um, Again, it's only a 2 game sample size, so all these numbers, all these percentages are super wonky. I'd
Mhm.
probably like to see a couple more starts for him just to see these numbers balance out. But if that walk rate continues to be an issue, right? If he's issuing 2 to 3 walks every single game, that's going to hurt his value, and I think maybe some of the concern is warranted.
Yeah, yeah, it is a little bit concerning. I wonder if the walk rate has anything to do with the diminished stuff, making him more reluctant to just attack the zone. I think
Yeah.
that that could be a factor, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna hope that he turns it around right away. But it does seem like he has kind of taken a step back from the dominant guy that he used to be. And I do wonder it was projections really didn't like Burns coming into the year. I noticed that in my draft prep, and I think that they might have been onto something. I know that the bat specifically had him, I think, like between a 3.5 and 4 ERA, which for a guy like Corbin Burns is pretty shocking to see. So we'll see what the full season line looks like. I don't think it'll be bad, but it might not be quite what you paid for on draft day.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Monday. Thanks to Christian Audubon for the Springer Has Sprung hitter recap article. But we are going to talk about James Wood. The Nationals went 1 for 3 with a homer, a run, 2 RBI, and a walk, and a stolen base for his first combo meal of the season. I was pretty down on James Wood this draft season just because of how high his ADP was getting. He ended up finishing with a consensus ADP of 52, which again in 12 teamers means that he was just pretty much going at the end of round 4, which is kind of crazy for a guy who wasn't like amazing last season. Had shown some really good batted ball metrics, but in terms of the counting stats, didn't really show too much. And in his, I think it was about half season that he was up in the majors, but he has not been out of the slow out. He has not been slow out of the gate in 2025. He's knocked in 4 home runs so far. He's stolen 2 bases. He's slashing 275, 356, 625. Just yeah, really crazy numbers. And honestly, I'll be happy to eat crow on these young guys. I was also kind of down on Churio. He's looks like he's kind of turning around a little bit right now. But yeah, I'll be happy to be wrong about these young guys if they could sustain this kind of production over an entire season. The one thing that's concerning is that Wood has a 33.3% strikeout rate. He is balancing that out with an 11% walk rate right now. He's got some ridiculous batted ball numbers though. 24% barrel rate, 80% home run to fly ball rate. He does hit the ball incredibly hard, but those are just insane numbers. Those should regress. But I think that just being said, just enjoy the breakout season for now. I think Wood is absolutely for real. This feels not this crazy as sustainable, but it is showing what he can be if he is using his elite power correctly. And yeah, it's turning out pretty well for him. And then Tyler Soderstrom of the Athletics, 2 for 3 with 2 homers, 2 runs, 2 RBI, and a walk. Yeah, speaking of power, Soderstrom is currently leading the home run race across the major leagues, hitting bombs number 5 and number 6 on Monday. With these homers come the run and RBI as well, although I guess frustrating enough, these were both solo homers. So It's, you wish there were more people on base, but it is what it is. Soderstrom is not all just power, though. He is currently batting 378 with a 20% strikeout rate and a 10% walk rate. That does come with a 379 BABIP, which is really high compared to his career, and a 60% home run to fly ball rate. So again, also a very high number. So probably don't think that high average is sustainable, but I think like Wood, I would enjoy the breakout here. Yeah, I'm definitely regretting dropping Soderstrom for Vinny P in my fantasy league, but that's just how things happen in fantasy baseball. But yeah, unfortunate that I'm not able to take advantage of this little breakout from Soderstrom. But yeah, Patrick, how do you feel about these two young guys really taking the majors by storm?
Yeah, it's fun to see. Wood, I was also not really super in on in draft season just because you're paying for something you haven't seen before. And I'm always a little reluctant to do that, even with a super talented player like Wood, who had a great, prospect pedigree. The batted ball profile right now for him is really weird. Like you're saying, he actually has a negative launch angle right now, which is crazy for someone with his level of juice. So that's definitely gonna dampen his power ceiling. But if he starts to lift the ball, like maybe Christian Yelich did a few years into his career, like he could put up some crazy power numbers. So that's just a super fun profile that you hope he taps into his full ability. And it might not be this year, but it could be. And Soderstrom, I think we talked about him last week too. It's like a post hype sleeper guy. He's playing in a great ballpark. He's finally getting the chance to play every day. And it seems like he has that kind of easy 30 home run type power. So it's super cool to see him, tied for the league lead in homers with Aaron Judge. That's cool stuff, and definitely was not expected.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to talk about a lot of A's players this year just because of how ridiculous Sutter Health Park is. They're just going to have good games there, and it's just going to happen.
Yeah,
All
got
right.
to
Well,
be
anyway,
careful starting your pitchers there for sure.
exactly. Yeah. It's like don't start your pitchers in Colorado. You might not want to start them in Sacramento as well. All right. Thanks to Nick Pollock for the Carmen Electric SP Roundup article. We're going to start with the title boy here, Carmen Majinski of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Got a win against St. Louis, went 5 innings, 1 run, 5 hits, 2 walks, and more importantly, 6 strikeouts. Is this real? I think is probably the question we're all asking. Majinski does. He's got two fastballs. He's got his sinker and his four seamer. Both were not that successful. Both had low strike rates, I should say, which is probably not good for the two pitches that you throw a lot. His slider and his sweeper were pretty solid, though. Had decent CSW, which is why he was able to get through this start against St. Louis. Again, it probably also helps that St. Louis wasn't that good. But nonetheless, for a guy who pretty much no one knew about, it is nice to see a little bit of success here. That being said, he goes to Cincinnati, face the Reds on Sunday, and then he gets Cleveland at home. And I just I would definitely avoid the Cincy start. I think if you're really desperate looking for a streamer, and I don't think he's one of the streamers that we're going to talk about later this episode, maybe consider him for that second one. But I would avoid going out of your way to pick him up immediately. I don't think Majinski is a guy that I'm, wanting to put on my watch list in fantasy leagues right now. But if he continues some of the success, maybe it works out. I mean, Pittsburgh has kind of had a little bit of a pitching renaissance in their young arms in the last couple seasons. So yeah, maybe this is just another name to keep watch on as the season goes on. He is going to be facing not necessarily Hunter Green, but Hunter Green's team, and Hunter Green had an amazing game. Also on Monday, he went 8.2 innings with no earned runs, 4 hits, 1 walk, and 7 strikeouts against San Francisco. Got the win there. Just a great start from Green. He was 1 out away from a complete game shutout. Would have loved to see that, but he was at 104 pitches. So since he pulled him, his four seamer was averaging 99 miles an hour. His slider earned 11 whiffs. Those are the numbers you were definitely hoping to see from Green ever since he got his call up to the majors. This is not an aberration. Through 3 starts, he's got a 1.31 ERA and a 0.63 WHIP. Awesome 3 game sample, but now he's got Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And that Orioles game will probably be a good test for Green. Believe it's going to be in Baltimore, so seeing what he looks like, just not at his home park. The most important number for Green, though, I think, is that 4% walk rate, which is half of his career rate. I think that's going to be a big thing for him. if he can continue to achieve that, especially in Great American Ballpark, where any base runner is dangerous, can come around to home. And yeah, being able to cut that walk rate down is going to be big for Green if that's sustainable for the entire season. But yeah, what do you think about these two guys, Patrick? Are is Carmen Bajinski someone that you are looking at all, or is he pretty much kind of an afterthought?
Yeah, not too much to add on him. I think he's like a deep league watch list type guy. I can't help but think that he's just kind of holding the spot for Jared Jones and Bubba Chandler. It's nice to see him have some success though. And then with Hunter Green, I mean, his stuff right now is undeniable. It's fun to see him. Like, hopefully, this is the start of an ace breakout for him. Especially with that increased velo, and his fastball shape is looking really good. You know, with the increased ride on it. I can't help but be a little worried about how hard he's throwing, just because of how many hard throwing starters we've seen go down the last year. But you know, we know that predicting pitcher injuries is kind of a fool's errand. So I would just say to really enjoy it while it lasts.
For sure, I think with Hunter, you just kind of expect that the way he throws the ball is probably not great for his arm, but nonetheless, you ride that as long as you can.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine he's the hardest throwing starter in the majors right now. I can't think of anybody else, so it's pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, especially now that Sandy isn't necessarily throwing at
Mhm.
100% for him at least. Yeah, Hunter's probably got the highest average fastball for a starter.
Yeah, very very impressive. Jump into to Tuesday, April 8th. The hitter recap that day was done by Scott McDermott with title on the Schwartz path. Shout out to Kyle Schwarber, who's been raking this year. I think he homered again tonight on Thursday. Not too much to say about him. We kind of know how awesome he is. I'm going to talk about one of the biggest breakout stars of the early MLB season, which is Kyron Paris, second baseman for the Angels. On Tuesday, he went 1 for 3 with a solo home run, or with a home run, where a run scored, two RBI, and a walk. Paris, I think, is up to 5 homers on the year and 3 or 4 steals. So there are heaters, and then there's what Kyron Paris is doing. He was a long shot to make the team a few weeks ago, but he continued a crazy hot streak with a first at bat home run in this game against Tampa Bay. And he was a decent prospect back in 2019 as a second round pick, but he struggled a little bit here and there in the minors. And then he was really awful last year in a small major league sample with the Angels. In the offseason, he went to work with reportedly Aaron Judge's hitting coach, teacher man, Richard Schenk. And he's added a leg kick to his swing, and he's been barreling up balls left and right. So he's clearly added some juice. That wasn't something that he showed to this extent in the minor leagues, even though he had some decent power numbers. He is struggling to make contacts a little bit, so he seems to be sacrificing some contact for power. But I'm wondering, you know, it's an intriguing power speed blend. But what do you really think? Do you think that this is a breakout in the making, or are we just paying a lot of attention to it because it's the first 2 weeks of the season?
I mean, I think I'd want to say the latter. I have not done too
Yeah.
much homework on Kyron Paris, but from what I know, he's more of a speed guy, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
that's at least his scouting report. Just looking at some of the minor league data on him, I mean, the most homers he had in the season was 2023, where he hit 14 at Double A, but that was accompanied by 44 stolen bases, right? And so the fact that he has five on the season in 10 games so far is pretty insane. Uh, I probably would be hesitant to call him like a 30-30 guy. Like, that is technically
Yeah.
the pace that he's on.
Right.
But I would not say that is what is in his future. Um, but yeah, I think that barrel rate being that high is probably going to come down. Don't love that really incredibly high whiff rate either. But the fact that he has that high whiff rate and still only has a 20% strikeout rate is like a good thing to see, right? He is kind of, even though he whips a lot, it doesn't necessarily mean he's striking out a lot, which is, something you'd like to see from some of those guys who do have a lot of whips. Do they still have the plate discipline and two strike counts to be able to avoid getting punched out? So I think there's definitely some change in his makeup. I am curious to see what the Angels would do when Neto comes back. Not saying that
Mhm.
replaces Paris, but it feels like he would be the easy candidate to get sent down. But I think he's probably playing too well for them to consider sending him down right now. They probably just DFA someone else on the roster.
Yeah, yeah, I think that he's going to be on the team for the whole season if he keeps playing well. I think Neto's going to bump Tim Anderson off
mm,
shortstop, right? And Tim
yeah.
Anderson doesn't need to play every day, but he's probably going to play a little bit at second base. So I don't think Paris is going to have everyday run for most of the season unless people get injured or DFA'd. I also think that it's kind of just a heater. I was happy to let other people pay more to get Paris or pick him up a little earlier than me. I know that the upside seems really high with the power speed, but yeah, the minor league track record is spotty. And obviously, the projections are bad as a result. If he made some big changes in the offseason, the projections aren't going to catch that. But I'm leaning into the larger sample a little bit here, even though it is fun to see, a young player on the Angels start to make some headway.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of his Statcast numbers, just because we do have some of that. Um, just trying to see what his max EVs were in the past couple seasons, but
Yeah, I think
uh,
that it's like his ex WOBA is it's obviously below his WOBA, but I think it is
yeah,
a really respectable number. So he is making great contact. It's just a question of whether he's going to keep it up.
right, yeah. So he had a max EV is 110 miles an hour last year. Right now his max EV is 108.
Hmm.
So he has some of that like top end power if he really needs to get to it. So I'm curious if he is hitting the ball harder more often. That's probably the big thing here, right? So being able to, if really he learned something from Aaron Judge's coach, maybe he is learning how to kind of use that power combined with average, right? That's kind of the thing that Judge is known for. Is that he's not just a power hitter; he's a triple crown candidate pretty much every single season because of how good his
Mhm.
average is as well. So maybe that is something to take away is that he's hitting the ball hard, but because he's hitting the ball hard more often, it's working out in his favor.
Right, and we see a lot of cases like this where young guys do great, and the league adjusts, right? So nobody
Yeah,
was thinking about how they had to get Kyron Paris out 2 weeks
yeah,
ago.
that's
They're
definitely
going to
true.
adjust now, and then it's a question of are you going to adjust back? So he's got a great start, but he's still got a lot of work to do to really be considered a reliable fantasy guy in my eyes.
Yeah, definitely.
And then on the pitching side on Tuesday, another rookie who really flashed, Shane Smith. So Nick in his SP roundup, Shane Smith was the cover boy with the header "Keep the Shane thing, the Shane thing." He went six scoreless, 2 hits, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts, 9 whiffs, and a 28% CSW. Of course, there's a no decision because he's on the White Sox. But he was a Rule 5 pick from the Brewers in the offseason, so he has to be on the roster the whole year for the White Sox to hold on to him. But based on how he's been pitching, that's not going to be a problem. Usually the Rule 5 draft, you get like a utility man or like a reliever who you save for low leverage situations and you're hoping to develop. But Smith has been contributing right away. It's been super impressive. His first 2 starts have been really strong. We'll see if he can keep it up. Nick was a little skeptical in the roundup because his velo on the fastball, really fell off towards the end of the game. He ideally will be sitting 95 to 96, but later in starts, it starts to get more like 93, 94, which it's an average fastball at that velocity. That I think that the little higher velocity is what makes it good. And he's got a nasty changeup. You'll see it on Pitching Ninja. It's got wicked movement at a pretty high speed, but his slider and curveball are kind of mediocre at this point. So he doesn't have, a bunch of weapons that he can carve you up with. And he's got a couple of challenging matchups. He's actually got a home and home with the Red Sox in the next 2 outings. So that's going to be a really steep test. So we'll get a pretty good, idea of where Smith is at after those 2 outings. But what leagues are you, watch listing, adding him in? Where do you think that he's, really worth rostering?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Shane Smith is a guy who I'd be like, oh, I need to pick him up.
Mhm.
Um, maybe in 15 teamers where you had a guy go down because of injury, like let's just say a roster spot opened up because you had Nestor Cortez, and you need a
Mhm.
guy to fill that. Maybe it makes sense to pick up, pick him up. I think the challenge is, I don't know how valuable he is in terms of wins or quality start leagues.
Mhm.
I should say specifically to get wins or quality starts, right? He's not going to get
Yeah.
wins a lot because he plays for the White Sox. I don't think he gets a lot of quality starts because I think he just, again, like he played the majority of the season last year in Double A, right? That's the reason why he was available for the Rule 5 draft. Um, not saying that Triple A guys aren't eligible for the Rule 5 draft, but usually it's those Double A guys that you see. So he
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have the workload of a MLB pitcher. And I think, like you mentioned, that fastball velocity started dipping in the latter half of that start for him. So he's probably not going to be able to go six pretty consistently either. Which means you're really looking at him as like a guy to help you with some strikeouts, maybe good-ish ratios, which really kind of limits what I think his value is. So yeah, I think in 15 teamers, if I have a spot open, I'll maybe pick him up, but I'm probably not necessarily dropping anyone for him unless like it's someone who's absolutely awful, where it would make sense to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm pretty much with you. He's an easy add in like dynasty and keeper formats just because of what he could be in the long term. But yeah, depending on your league format, if you got quality starts and wins, like you said, he's not going to be a great source. He only threw 95 innings last year, so he's not going to, make 30 starts this year of 6 innings, right? They're going to have to baby him a little bit down the stretch in all likelihood. So yeah, I think you should add him in your deeper formats, and maybe sit him against the Red Sox if you can afford to. But I think that he is some intrigue, right? The White Sox have a lot of interesting pitching prospects, and you can just kind of add him to the list, and it's cool to see him having success at the major league level right away.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly like even if you don't pick him up for those Red Sox games, like there's a good chance he'll probably still be on the waiver wire, with those two, just
Hopefully,
because
but
of
if
how good that
he
offense is.
yeah, but if he has another good start against the Red Sox, I think his rostership is gonna, skyrocket
Yeah,
because people are just gonna see the great season long line and they're just gonna start adding him in droves.
that's definitely true. All right, moving on to Wednesday's games. Thanks to Kyle Stansel for the Sea to Shining Seager hitter recap article. And we are going to start with Josh Naylor of the Diamondbacks. 3 for 4 with a homer, a run, and 3 RBI. Yeah, the new first baseman is fitting in pretty well. He was on the back end of a back to back home run duo in the fifth inning. This was surprisingly his first homer of the year, so it took a little bit to get to there. But yeah, Naylor is pretty underrated for what he provides. Like he's not necessarily a massive power guy, right? Last year, I think he set his career high with 31 homers. But he generally just provides a really good average. He's like a good all around first baseman, right? He's not going to be like a top three, top five guy, but he's at least a top 10 guy who's going to help you in most of your leagues. Yeah, last year he was slashing 243, 320, 456. So nothing super awesome, but still pretty good. This year, again, small sample size, but he's got a really high walk rate still, 12.7%. His strikeout rate is incredibly small at 5.5%. His slash line looks great, 340, 418, 511. Is that sustainable? Probably not, but I think it's in line with what we expect from Josh Naylor. So, yeah, at least good start to the season for him. Good to finally get that first homer as well. And then Teoscar Hernandez of the Dodgers, 2 for 5, a home run, a run, and 3 RBI. Uh, it was probably one of I hesitate to call it quiet because I think there was still a lot of intrigue on what was going to happen with Teoscar Hernandez this offseason, but of course he re-signed with the Dodgers. And yet he is looking really, really good. This game was his fifth home run of the season. Allowed the Dodgers to get a 6-5 win over the Nationals. And even with Freddie Freeman out of the lineup, he's been really, really solid for the Dodgers in his absence. Is he on track to be hit more than 33 homers? That was his career high last year. He's on track for it. Is he going to get there? I'm not sure, but the way that this Dodgers team is playing, I think everyone is playing lights out on offense right now. So it would not surprise me if he got really close to that or eclipsed that by a couple homers this season. So, yeah, a couple power hitters there on Josh Naylor on a new team, Teoscar on his old team. How do you feel about both of those guys this season?
Yeah, not too much to add, really. I think they're both super bankable. It's going to be fun to see Naylor in that Arizona offense, a little more high powered than Cleveland, even with the Marte injury. Yeah, he seems like a guy who you'd think would be streaky because he swings a lot. He doesn't really walk that much, at least in the past. But he's been a great year, year over year producer. I don't think he's had a bad fantasy season, in like 3 years. Same thing with Teoscar. He struggled a little bit in Seattle, right? But now that he's in LA, he's really thriving. So yeah, those are two guys, you were picking inside the top 100 who look like they're gonna return some good value for you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, thanks to Nick Pollock for the Revan Gossman SP Roundup article, and we are going to talk about the title character in this one, Kevin Gossman. Toronto against Boston got 8 innings, no one runs, 4 hits, no walks, and 10 strikeouts. Still got the no decision though, unfortunately. Yeah, he went crazy with the four seamers. Was a lot of usage on that. Had 13 whiffs with a 22% swing and strike rate, 40% CSW. Really good vertical break on it, 18 inches of that. But then the thing was like his splitter wasn't really that great to accompany it, and but it was the fastball was kind of all he needed in this start. Um, do you, I don't know. Do you think Gossman is a guy who we should be paying attention to, or do you feel like this start was really a flash in the pan?
I mean, I wouldn't expect too many more starts like this, but I do think that he fell maybe more than he should have in draft season. I mean, he was a guy who I think was going in the top 50 last year, and then really struggled, but still made it through the full season with at least an okay line. I think that the better fastball shape is going to go a long way for him because he really is a two pitch guy. He has a slider, but it really is not good. He just kind of throws it as like a taste breaker. So I think that the every inch of vert, extra that you can get on that fastball to kind of create that greater movement differential between the fastball and the splitter is going to go a long way. So I think that he's a guy who, should be owned everywhere. Obviously, he's starting pretty much every game. And I think that I think he could break back into, the top 100 players. Maybe we were a little bit too harsh on, what we saw from Gossman last year and kind of faded him a little too hard as a result. I definitely wish I had some shares.
Yeah, I think the key thing is that fastball, right? Because I remember listening to Nick and Eno talk about Gossman last season. I think it was just an overall, it was a podcast on like two pitch pitchers. And if
Mhm.
Gossman was like, the splitter is elite, right? We all know the splitter is amazing for Gossman. The problem is he pairs it with a pretty weak fastball. So the fact that if he's getting more vertical break on it this year, and like you mentioned, if that fastball shape is just better, right? If it's just a better pitch in general, that's going to help his splitter get better, right? I think the usage is kind of interesting in how much he uses that fastball. But that being said, I'm kind of with you. I wish I maybe had one or two shares of Gossman just to like have some of the success there,
Mhm.
because of how good he has been in years past. But wouldn't necessarily expect him to be, a strikeout and inning guy right now. At least I don't think that's necessarily what we are hoping to get from Gossman.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't overreact, even though it was a great outing.
Yeah. Finally, Grant Holmes. I just want to talk about him because this line just was not very good. But I think it showed a lot of interesting stuff. He was facing the Phillies, got a no decision in this one, only went 4 innings. No one runs, though, 3 hits, 4 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Uh, didn't have a great strike break on his four seamer, but the main thing for him was just how he was locating his pitches, basically going Blake Snell blueprint. Fastballs high, breaking pitches low. Good pitch separation for him, and his slider was phenomenal, getting nine out of 25 whiffs. The main thing for him is actually his next few starts are really good. He gets the Jays and then the Twins. Now the Jays lineup is kind of scary, but the Twins lineup is more or less dead. So feel free to get him there. Of course, the question is what happens when Strider returns. Next week, I think. Right, I think that's what we mentioned.
Yep.
Like you mentioned, it's most likely that Bryce Elder goes down. It's probably not going to be that Holmes goes down. And the fact that he got to 104 pitches in this one, yes, it took 4 innings for him to do that, but he's clearly fully stretched out. If he gets a pretty easy matchup, I think it's a good reason to put him out there. But yeah, any thoughts on Grant Holmes?
Yeah, I think his spot is super safe with the Ronaldo Lopez injury. Strider is gonna probably bump out Bryce Elder, and then I think Smith Shawver would even go before him if they want to promote somebody else, just because he has nasty stuff, but he's really struggling to command the ball, and they might want to monitor his innings a little bit. And with Holmes, it seems like they're just going to let him go. I mean, he threw 104 pitches and 4 innings in this game. He threw over 90 pitches in a spring training start. He's like a 29-year-old, mostly minor league journeyman. So, they're happy to get whatever they can out of him.
Yeah.
So I think that he's got a deep arsenal, right? He's not an ace, but he's going to eat some innings for them. And hopefully, I don't think, Atlanta's as bad as they've shown. So he should be a good source of quality starts and wins. I think he might have some, bad ratio outings, like the whip was not great here. But I think that he's a, pretty easy start, in your 12 team, 10, maybe 10 teams, leave him on the wire, but 12 and deeper, I think you should have him.
Yeah, that's a really good point that he's like kind of the old guy on the block compared to the other two pitchers. Um, yeah, the Braves are just going to let him go until
Yeah.
figurative until his arm blows out, but just until he's just bad, and then they're like, okay, great, we got some young guys in the wings who can take your spot, but they're probably just going to let him go as far as he'll take them, but hopefully that works out for him. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Pitcher List writer Nate Schwartz will be joining us to talk about his article, Mason Wynn and the Dread of a Successful Rookie Season. We're back, and we're now joined by Pitcher List writer Nate Schwartz, frequent contributor to the podcast at this point. I'm not counting how many times you've been on the pod, Nate, but it's got to be like 5 or more at this point.
I believe this is number 5.
This is number 5.
This one gets me a free sandwich. So,
yes, yeah, exactly.
Excited to be back.
We'll get your punch card after the interview's over. But yeah, you wrote an article about Mason Wynn and the dread of a successful rookie season, which I'm sure was a little close to the heart for you being a Cards fan. How's the beginning of the baseball season been going for you so far?
It's been good. I'm just, so happy that baseball's back, and I feel like it is really such a slog getting through the end of draft season and all of the prep. And once we get into the in-season management and, new data, new stuff going on to analyze is just, really such a relief, and it really feels good to be back. My fantasy teams are off to a slower start than I really wanted, but I think that'll correct itself in due time.
Yeah, there is something fun about kind of trolling the waiver wire as opposed to like prepping for drafts. That it is exhausting, but it is still fun to kind of do that on a daily or weekly basis, I guess, depending on your leagues. So how are the Cards doing though, in terms of real baseball?
I mean, not so hot. I know they took down your Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, you swept us. That was great.
They took a step back, but a lot of exciting things. A lot of the young offensive players are starting to show signs of life outside of Ivan Herrera's injury. And, the pitching struggling is, I'm kind of shrugging at it. They weren't supposed to be good. They don't need to show us anything. And, I'm hopeful we get a Quinn Matthews promotion here in, maybe the end of April, early May. But, it's just enough to make me tune in every night, which is, I guess all you can really ask for.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like somewhat enjoyable. All right, well, we are going to get into your article. And we're going to talk about Mason Wynn, who I think in terms of fantasy relevance, he's kind of right on the outside of maybe being, relevant in 12-teamers. And part of that, maybe he might be a little less relevant right now because he's having a little bit of a sophomore slump. Granted, we're only 2 weeks into the season. But before we get all negative about Mason Wynn for the rest of this interview, obviously your article is titled "The Dread of a Successful Rookie Season," implying that Wynn had a successful rookie season last year. So what was great about his season? I don't know that most fantasy managers probably knew what was going on, since the Cards just weren't that fun to pay attention to last year. But yeah, how did Wynn show his value both at the plate and in the field in 2024?
Yeah, so I mean, he had a cup of tea in 2023 in September and was just completely dreadful. It was like a sub 30 WRC plus, which, is barely tenable. And it, you start asking the questions, is this guy going to even contribute at the big league level? He turns around 2024, had a 103 WRC plus. So, like just slightly above average, but for a 22-year-old shortstop, that's, as much as you can ask for a guy who wasn't necessarily going to be like a true superstar, but rather an everyday regular contributor. Kind of from the fantasy perspective, he was, as you said, on the outside looking in. he had 15 homers and 11 stolen bases, which, are serviceable numbers for maybe a like fringe asset, but nothing spectacular, but, still useful. And then defensively, that's what keeps him in the lineup. He's got this incredible range and even better arm that, the plays are super flashy and, make sure that he's in the lineup just about every day that he can be, which, really sets up the Cardinals to see that, they have a potential franchise shortstop on their hands who, has maybe 5 more years left ahead, and having a good baseline rookie year can really set him up for success going forward.
Right. It feels like he's in that range of guys that you would be considering for like a middle infield spot and like a 12 to 15 teamer. Is that kind of the range that you would put Win at in terms of his fantasy relevance?
Yeah, he kind of showed up as one of my like late dart throws. Like guys I like, if I went really heavy on late pitchers, and, he kind of shows up at the end there of a guy like, what, like I like what he's doing. I think he could get a breakout, and, I know that as long as he's healthy, he's going to play. He had 150 games last year, and I think the Cardinals would throw him out there for 162 if they could. So I think it was just like a not bad dart throw to have. Is just, an everyday guy whose defense will keep him in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think that Win is like a good example, or it kind of shows you how much the shortstop position has really changed in recent years from a fantasy perspective. Like, I feel like 10 or 15 years ago, it was a lot of glove first guys, maybe had a decent batting average, but no pop. And now there's guys like, Bobby Witt, Ellie De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson. So like a 15-15 guy like Win, someone who used to have a little bit more fantasy relevance, like kind of flies under the radar these days. So it just shows like how talented the shortstop pool is right now.
Absolutely. You need to hit everywhere, and even, being a slightly above average hitter doesn't cut it like it used to.
Yeah, 100%. So one thing when I was reading your article, I know that you focused on was Win's approach last year with 2 strikes. And there's a lot to be said about hitters who are aggressive in 0 and 1 strike counts, but then shift their approach with 2 strikes. So what did you see from Win in those 2 strike counts last year that really helped him be successful?
Yeah, so he was in, non 2 strike counts, he was this very average aggressive hitter. And then when he got to 2 strikes, he became this uber 90th percentile aggressive guy. Basically, if you threw something even close to the zone and maybe, very far from it, he was swinging. His 17% strikeout rate wasn't like crazy low, but a very solid figure to hold. But what was really interesting is he had a really low put away rate and a really high 2 strike swing rate. So basically, put away rate being, how many 2 strike pitches is he actually punching out on? So he was in the realm of like Jose Ramirez, Cody Bellinger, Luis Arias, of guys who just, wouldn't strike out, have this great bat control. And he was really just taking a bunch of these like bad swings, more or less, where, you see the pitcher throw, a 2 strike slider down in a way that the hitter has, no real reason to make contact with. And, Win is up there flailing, just making contact just to survive. And this approach, it worked, I think, in what he intended it to do. He didn't necessarily have, much damage on it, but he had 82 strike hits, which I think ranked second among all hitters in baseball last year. So clearly it was this approach that if he got to 2 strikes, he was going to swing at everything and just kind of hope that it all worked out. And, that's what he did, which is a really, really unique position to be in as this guy who doesn't have the best, maybe batted ball metrics, but rather was able to maximize when pitchers were trying to like get an edge in striking him out.
Yeah, and assuming that obviously his approach could change, right, and to some extent this year already has, but do you feel like that's a sustainable 2 strike approach, or would you like to see changes? I mean, what's your kind of ideal?
It's obviously, not something like I love. I usually prefer guys who are a little bit more selective, make generally better swing decisions. But for a more undersized guy who maybe hasn't filled into the power that we think he can get to, I know a lot of the prospect sites have labeled potential like 50 in-game power as his potential. this is what's working for him. And it's really hard, especially at a young age, for a player to lose the bat to ball like that. Like that's something, Luis Arias, it doesn't matter where he goes, what situation he's in, he has that bat to ball. So seeing that, it works and it's great. And I think as we'll get to, he's changing his approach to potentially unlock a little bit more that, this setup maybe isn't as working as much for.
Yeah. Also just shout out to Kyle Bland for creating some pretty cool graphs that we can take advantage of. For those who haven't seen Nate's article, there's two graphs there. One of them is Mason Wynn's just swing aggression just in general. And it's like kind of, it's an interesting graph, I should say, but it doesn't like say anything really about how aggressive it is. His season average in terms of swing aggression on a rolling 400 pitch face basis is like below MLB average. And then when you look at two strikes accounts, he's like more or less like 90th percentile or higher. It's kind of crazy how aggressive he is in those two strike counts. So yeah, looking at this season now, it's only been a couple weeks. It has not been great for Wynn, but yeah, what have you seen from his approach at the plate? And then specifically, thanks to StatCast, we now have new stats regarding bat speed. Is there anything interesting that you've noticed from looking at his bat speed data in 2025?
Yeah, so there are two things that kind of go hand in hand. First, his bat speed is up over a mile an hour, and it's now at like 71.5 average bat speed, which is only 40th percentile, but the more he works his way off of kind of the bottom of the barrel bat speed, that gives him an opportunity to maybe tap into more of that power. But then the other thing is that his bat speed data is showing three different swings. What I mean by that is on Baseball Savant, you can view the player's bat speed distribution. And these visuals are in the article as well, which might make it easier to look at. But what basically it does is it shows a bell curve of a player's swing speeds by frequency. And Wynn last year had, he basically had one-ish swings. The majority of his swings were at a bat speed that was all around the 70 mark. It's a pretty straight bell curve. And then there was just a small bump kind of at the bottom of it, which basically was indicating that's where his kind of garbage swings, fighting off to live to the next pitch, two strike swings. So far in 2025, we're seeing three different kind of peaks in the data. So it's not really a true bell curve. You have kind of the top near the 71.5 kind of average bat speed, which is kind of considered, I think, his A swing, where he's swinging, as hard as he comfortably wants, looking to do damage and stuff like that. Then he still has his kind of garbage two strike swings, albeit less frequency. And then he has a swing in the middle. And what this is showing me is that he's very clearly changed his approach. It's an intentional decision to have kind of a middle ground swing, which maybe makes me think that he's trying to do a little bit more damage with two strikes. And we're seeing that he clearly has made a trade-off of trading contact with two strikes for strikeout rate, trying to do power. Obviously, the power hasn't really actualized yet, but his strikeout rate is, I believe, over 30% right now, or it was at least at the time of writing. It's at 31%. So he's making this trade-off, and while it's getting better, there's still kind of, it's a rough patch that he's going through as he starts to figure out, how does this work? How can he tap into more power and really, I think fully kind of grasp all of his potential this year and potentially beyond.
So is that middle speed swing that he's got the one that he's using more often in two strike counts to get more contact, or is he really focusing a bit more of that A swing, that higher velocity swing in those two strike counts, like as you mentioned, to basically get more power instead of contact?
So I wasn't able to, I don't think you really can filter on the bell curve visualization. I know you can in Savant Search, and I didn't take a look at that. But I have a pretty good feeling that that middle ground is going to be used in 2-strike counts or counts where he's not, not in an advantageous position, because it really doesn't make sense for any hitter to not be swinging 100% in counts where there are no holds barred, like you're looking to do damage. So I think that's kind of a new 2-strike approach. And all of the other peripherals kind of reflect that as well.
Right. So it's basically a bit faster than what his approach was last year in those 2-strike accounts. More likely, like that's probably what's happening here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he's just having a really slow adjustment period to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
And I mean, yeah, he's 23 years old. Trying to go through an approach change like this might be a huge lift for him, especially if he's been doing something a specific way his entire pro career. And that's why the article itself was titled "The Dread of the Successful Rookie Season." We all know his teammate Jordan Walker had a phenomenal 2023. They tried to change a bunch of things, and he was demoted. He really struggled at the big league level, and last year was, by all accounts, a lost year for Walker. So it's really interesting to see that Wynn is going through these changes, struggling as well, but trying to grasp how is he attacking it and how is he actually trying to survive at the big league level with all these changes.
Yeah, and the good thing with Wynn, at least, thinking as a, not just fantasy, is that he plays, the most important position on the diamond and has, he's a good fielder, if not a great fielder. So even if he struggles at the plate, unlike Walker, he's going to provide value in a lot of other ways. So that's, like he offers a good floor, at least from a real life perspective. But, based on what you've seen so far and the changes that you're seeing, what do you think we need to see from Mason Wynn for the rest of the year to, to restore a little bit of faith that this isn't going to be a sophomore slump type season for him?
I think the biggest thing is just tracking the strikeout rate. If you pull up again, it's a really small sample, but even if you look at his rolling strikeout rate now, you already see it start to come down over the last couple of games. I know when he kind of broke out of his 0-for start to the season, he had, I think, 4 straight 2-hit games. He finally hit his first home run. But I think because so much of his approach hinged on hitting with 2 strikes, and that was a very unique thing to him, where he was able to provide value where maybe he wasn't providing as much value earlier in the count. Being able to cut down on the strikeouts through the season maybe suggests that he's making better swing decisions, and harder swings in these more difficult counts will lead to more power if you're swinging harder. It's just, and obviously making contact, like that's just a matter of fact. So I think really kind of, as we watch him in the rest of April and into May, see how he's reacting to that, to see if there is potentially a new ceiling that he could get to, rather than, maybe he will do all of this to just go 15-15 again. Or, if it all clicks and it goes how he wants to, maybe he is getting to 20-15 or 20 or 25-15 or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's probably key to mention last year Wynn in 150 games had a 17% strikeout rate, right? And right now he's got a 31%. So probably like in order to maybe tap into that power a little bit more, and you got to be willing to risk a little bit of that 17%, but probably don't love it staying at 31% for the rest of the season.
Exactly. It's a fair thing to do, of making the trade-off contact for power. You see, like, it's one of the most classic things you can development things you can do in baseball. But there's really a limit on how much you can do it. And I think maybe if he nestles into the like 20-ish, 21, 22% strikeout rate, which is around league average, that'll be fine. And, if it's late in the game, game on the line, he can go back to last year, fight off a bunch of pitches and be who he was and have that in the bag. But generally, I think we just want to see that strikeout rate come down to like a normal amount of loss for trying to get to more power.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to have our first Would You Rather question of 2025. This will be fun. This will be open for both Patrick and Nate. Basically, rest of the season, right? We've got Mason Wynn, who's one of these kind of young shortstops who is kind of just on the cusp of fantasy relevance in 15 teamers. But we got three other guys who I think I'd like to see you two both rank. In just terms of where do you like the rest of the season, and so that would be Mason Wynn, obviously, Jacob Wilson of the Athletics, Anthony Volpe and his torpedo bat of the Yankees, and then Xavier Edwards, the speed demon down in Miami. So Nate, we'll start with you since you're the guest. Out of those four shortstops, who do you like as someone who might be on your fantasy team by the end of season? Just kind of rank those four and who do you like better?
Yeah, so I think number one, this is not torpedo bat biased, but I'm going to go Anthony Volpe. Regardless of that, because obviously he's kind of cooled off in the last week or so, I think he has the best chance of going 2020. He's done it before. I know the batting average might be a bit of question, but it should be palatable if it's like 230, 240. And that's a guy, if you're getting 20 homers, 20 steals from your probably MI slot, that's really, really useful. Second, I have Jacob Wilson. Kind of on the flip side, his bat to ball just is blowing me out of the water. It really looks like it's a legit tool. The average will be great. And I think we're seeing that he can tap into power. And it also helps that the Athletics Park is looking pretty hitter friendly. So, I think he has potential to hit 300 and hit 10, 12 homers, which is also really, really valuable from your MI spot. The next two, between Wynn and Xavier Edwards, it's kind of a toss-up. I lean Wynn just because he is more of an all-around contributor. And for Xavier Edwards, I don't really like the average-only, like complete zero power guys. But at the same time, if you're playing in a deeper league, maybe a 15 team where you want bulk, Mason Wynn is hitting 9th for the Cardinals. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon, even if he's playing well. So that is really going to depress a lot of your counting stats. So maybe in the situation where you're deciding between those two, I would maybe turn away from Wynn depending on your roster construction.
Yeah, I think just some stats for context. Volpe currently has 4 homers on the season, is batting 234, so not great there. But Jacob Wilson on the flip side, batting 396. Just kind of insane.
Completely sustainable.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, he's gonna be the first 400 hitter in a while. And then 2 homers on the season, but has 8 runs and 7 RBI. So both those guys are doing really well in the stat sheet. And yeah, so Patrick, to you, how do you rank those 4 guys? Is it any different than what Nate's got, or is it pretty much the same?
Yeah, pretty similar, but a little bit different ordering. I would agree that Volpe is definitely first. I don't think there's a huge gap between him and these other 3 guys, but I think there is a gap. He's in the best offense out of the 4 of them for sure. So that goes a long way. And then, yeah, he is, offers the best power speed blend too. Like Nate said, he has gone 2020 before. And he's also still kind of figuring out who he is as a hitter, kind of like Mason Wynn, but, he's been doing it for a year longer and has showed more fantasy upside. So I would have him first. I think I would have Xavier Edwards second. I didn't like him at cost that draft season, like pick 150 or whatever it was that he was going. Like I couldn't get there on the profile that, that no power profile. But I do think that he at least offers a decently safe floor, like a 270 floor. And I think 40 is not the floor of steals, but it's kind of close to it just given his speed. But a really bad offense. And I think that the other 2, I think everybody besides Volpe I'd have pretty close. I would probably put Wilson third. I haven't done a deep dive on him yet, but the contact skills do seem like pretty supernatural, like Arias level stuff. And I think that that's going to take him a long way, but also it could be like 10 home runs and no steals or 3 steals. And, how much is that going to do for your team? And I think I would have Wynn, just right behind him. He's going to have better home run and stolen base numbers, but obviously taking the big hit and average there. And then also a little bit of volume issues. He should be in there every day, but he is hitting 9th, like you're saying, Nate. So, he's going to get 3 plate appearances a lot of games instead of 4, 4 when other guys are getting 5. So I think that is going to work against him a little bit, even if he plays 150 games.
Yeah. Love those picks. I think, out of those 4, I definitely have Volpe first. Also because I have him on one of my fantasy teams, so I have to selfishly root for him to do well. Or else then what's the point? And then for the other 3, I think it's like just kind of dependent on what you're looking for. I think Mason Wynn probably offers the most multi-category help, but that being said, Jacob Wilson, like, assuming that A's offense is as good as it's been advertised for the first couple of weeks of the season, right? Like, that could be a really good source of runs and RBI, even if he's just a guy who hits 350. Like, that works pretty well in terms of getting on base and being able to get people, be able to score people. And then I think I have Win over Edwards, just because I think with Edwards there's just I don't love that there's no power with him, and just being able to get even just 10 homers from Win, especially if you're in some sort of like roto league, is just more helpful than maybe getting double the steals from Edwards, just because you probably just need more help in the homer department than you might need in the steals department. But yeah, love that conversation. Obviously, we're gonna have a lot more would you rather's for the remainder of the year. So nice to get that first one out of the way. But yeah, that's it for our interview with Nate. Obviously, always love having you coming on to the show. Before we let you go, though, Nate, how can people kind of get in touch with you on social media? Do you have any articles in process right now? I know you do because you've been writing one every single week. But any fun ones that are coming up that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I'm currently taking a look at the overall league landscape of hitting right now. It's really interesting. Walk rate is up like 0.5% from last year and the last couple of years. And it seems to be a little bit of an outlier. And I'm really curious to see if hitters are starting to make a little bit more decisions, or is it that pitchers are throwing a lot more pitches these days and more off-speed pitches, and they're not in the zone as much as they once were. So it's really hard to find legitimate things to write about this early in the year before stats stabilize. So trying to identify things that we can legitimately take a look at now early on is really what I'm trying to do. But other than that, you can find me on Twitter or X at _Nate Schwartz, and on Blue Sky at nschwartz.bsky.social. And yeah, I mean, as always, I love coming on to talk about whatever's going on. So appreciate the opportunity for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I will say it is kind of interesting reading Nick's roundups the past couple of weeks of how low some of these strike rates are on these pitches. So I don't know if I've just been noticing that and didn't kind of connect it with the walk rates going up, but that is something that is I mean, it's only a 2.5, 3 week sample size, but it is interesting that it is.
It's very subtle, but I was looking at comparing April of previous years as well, so it's not a full season, and I really think you kind of see it with torpedo bats and the traject hitting machines, but I really think we're approaching at least somewhat more of an equilibrium of the kind of pitching and hitting balance of who's getting new ideas and who's doing new things. So it'll be really, really curious to monitor throughout the year, which way that breaks, if it's this year, is it next year, or when that may be.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll take a look out for that article coming up soon. But yeah, thanks again, Nate, for coming on the show. And then after this, we will talk pitching streamers for next week. We are going to cover streamers for next week. Patrick, let us know, what are some guys that we should be keeping an eye out if we are looking to stream some pitchers?
Yeah, so the first one, super easy call, I think, is Richard Fitz. He's 8% rostered on Yahoo and 4% on ESPN. He gets the White Sox this weekend. So, as you're, listening to this, I think it's Saturday, he'll be pitching. And then he gets the White Sox again next weekend. like we were talking about earlier, Giolito might slot back into the rotation. So hopefully that doesn't disrupt the schedule here. But I think he's going to boot Newcomb from the rotation. Fitz should hopefully get the 2 starts here that he's on track for. The White Sox have the 4th worst WRC plus in the league so far. And, that was expected, right? We know they're a terrible offense and just not a great team. And Fitz has had mixed results so far, but he's gone 6 innings in both of his starts. So he'll be a great, option in these next couple of weeks in quality starts and wins leagues.
Yeah, I think I have Fitz on one of my leagues. I definitely am looking to pick him up on the other ones as well. Um, I I like him. There's not much to not like about. I think he's just a solid guy. Not like anything crazy, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, good option to get you a quality start that won't hurt your ratios too much.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the Twins to put Pablo Lopez on the IL so I can go grab
Oh yeah,
Richard Fitz
good
in the
point.
league. So hopefully they do that soon because they're kind of milking it a little bit.
Yeah, I would expect them to do him. Well, I mean, I would say soon. They just had a 4-game series against the Royals, so they should be calling him up for this, calling someone up at least as a reliever for the Detroit games. We'll see when that happens, though.
Yep. Hopefully Friday. Next one is someone that I think we talked about last week too. Mitchell Parker, left-handed pitcher for the Nationals. He has pretty high roster SIP rates for what you'd expect, just because he's had 2 good starts to start the year. 20% owned on Yahoo, 13% on ESPN. He is facing the Marlins tomorrow, so that's Friday. Friday the 11th, right? Yeah, Friday the 11th. So, we called him out last week for that start. And then next week, he is going to get Pittsburgh on the road. So, again, one of the weakest offenses in the league. Um, Parker is a guy who, he usually does work pretty deep into games, and he does well against these weaker teams. The next week, he's going to have a tough 2-step in all likelihood against the Orioles and the Mets. So might not want to run him out there for that unless he's really continues to pitch well and it's a deeper league. But yeah, Marlins and Pirates back to back. You can't really ask for much more than that for Parker.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add here. I think Parker's a really good streamer option, and yeah, don't pick him up against those good teams.
Yeah, you can. You'd be playing with fire a little bit with that for sure. Next one, not a guy I really expected to be recommending at any point this year, but it's Taijuan Walker. He's trying to salvage that Philadelphia contract. He's currently the SP5 in Philly, and I think he's been scoreless in his first 2 outings of the year, which explains why he's 12% roster on Yahoo and 10% on ESPN. Normally, he'd be around that 1 to 2%. But yeah, this is kind of a deep leagues only play. He gets 2 home starts next week against the Giants and the Marlins. Giants are okay offense, but I wouldn't say great. And the Marlins obviously are a pretty weak offense. What we've seen with Walker is he's throwing a little harder than he was last year. Obviously, he needs to have success because he's been kind of terrible the last 2 years. But he has like a 6 to 7 pitch kitchen sink type arsenal. So he's been, leaning on that slightly increased velocity and performing better. One thing I will say is this is definitely not a long-term play. Ranger Suarez is supposed to have a rehab start soon and is going to take Walker's place in the rotation unless they go 6-man. But yeah, this is a very short-term play in your deeper formats.
I think the appropriate thing to react to his last 2 starts is surprise. And I think that is the appropriate way to react to any good Taijuan Walker start, just in general.
Yeah, this is maybe like main events, right? Or like NL only leagues type call. If you're playing in a 12-teamer, you can definitely do better than Walker.
Yes, for sure.
Next one and our last one is it's I would say a wins league only play. It's Landon Knack. He's slotting in as SP5 right now for the Dodgers, and he pitched poorly earlier this week against Washington. But next week he's going to face the Rockies at home, which, as we know, is one of the best matchups in baseball for your pitcher. So Knack showed pretty well last year in a decent big league sample. And I think he has a decent chance to get through 5 and get the win against a weak Rockies lineup in this next start.
Yeah, I think if I was going to rank these guys and who I'd like to pick up next week, it's probably Fitz, Parker, Knack, and then Walker. Yeah, with Knack, it's just like, yeah, hope he gets the win there and doesn't get knocked around. Unlikely to against the Rockies, but they can have a few surprises here and there. So, really good streamer picks for next week.
Yeah, I think Fitz has got to be the top priority. He's definitely the best pitcher of the bunch and has the easiest matchup, so he should be our number one for sure.
Yeah. All right, well, that will wrap it up for this episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Again, you can find us at This Week PL on Twitter. Send us your comments or questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at TheJohnK, and you can find Patrick on Twitter at pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitcher List podcast feed. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen to or watch a podcast, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitcher List Pro. By doing so, you can join us in the Pitcher List Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts, and writers over there. That is going to be all for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.